But today we want to continue talking about You Make Me Crazy, talking about surviving relationships God's way. And today we're at a point where we have to deal with or discuss. We've talked about boundaries, but now we're going to talk about breaking free from abuse. Something that we don't like to talk about in church, especially in the black church. We don't like to talk about the abuses that go on. And if we do talk about it, the only thing we want to equate to that is physical abuse. But there are many types of abuse that goes on. As a matter of fact, one of the most prevalent abuses that occurs is emotional abuse that happens in the body of Christ. It happens with people in the pews, out of the pews, in families, at work, in different spaces and places. We find out that there's emotional abuse that goes on. And so we have to start to look at that from a biblical perspective of how we can deal with and address it. But we must recognize and acknowledge the fact that it is there. We can't just keep ignoring it. Many people are depressed. Many people are struggling. Many people are going through because of some type of abuse that has occurred in their life. Or they may be in the midst of some type of abusive situation. So we want to look at that from this biblical perspective. And so as always, if you have any questions, please feel free. Any input, please feel free to share that with us while we're going through it. If we don't make it through the sheet, that's all right. We'll pick back up the next time we come together. So breaking free from abuse, surviving relationships. There's never an excuse to abuse somebody or to be abused by somebody. Never an excuse. I don't care what anybody says. There's never an excuse for abuse to happen at any spectrum because it's not helpful in any way. Abuse is designed to suppress somebody. And we got to make sure that when we see or witness or experience abuse, that we try to get some help as soon as possible. Abusive relationships in any form, be it physical, emotional, financial, sexual, coercive, or psychological, can have long-term scars. Because if it's never dealt with, if it's never addressed, those scars will always be there, and these will be scars that never heal. Not making light of anybody who is diabetic, but those people who are diabetic, sometimes they get wounds that take forever to heal. When we don't deal with abuse, it's likened to a wound on someone who is diabetic. It stays in that state until we begin to deal with it, dress it, attend to it, put some type of ointment on it. And the ointment we use for these types of abuses we're talking about is different from the ointments you buy over the counter. But we have to deal with it. And it's no surprise that these scars can flare up again when beginning a new relationship. Because if you never deal with the abuse from the old relationship, if you start a new one, it's going to carry over into that one. You're going to be resentful, you're going to be bitter, or the abuser is going to continue to abuse because they thought they could get away with it the first time and nobody ever dealt with it. All of us, if the truth be told, has dealt with some form of abuse. We have. We can act as holy as we want to when we come to church, but we have dealt with some form of abuse. And we have to be willing to acknowledge the fact that I've been abused, I've been misused, or if you've been the abuser, that you may not tell everybody else, but you need to let the Lord know, I've been the abuser, Lord, forgive me, help me not to do that again. We have to learn how to address it. No matter how different this relationship might be, it's totally normal to be wary, and you could find it difficult to place trust in a new relationship. And so there now you see people with trust issues because the last relationship was so bad. Now it's hard for me to trust the person in the new relationship. They had nothing to do with what happened to you before. They came along at a time when you really needed somebody, but now you're carrying over that past baggage. And when there's no trust, there is no relationship. It's not. I don't care what we say. There's no right or wrong way to feel when trying to process what happened to you. The most important thing is to get out of the relationship safely and then take your time to heal, moving forward however you can. You got to get out while you can. Because if it doesn't kill you physically, it'll kill you emotionally. It'll kill you spiritually. And when you have these types of abuses that go on, they start to bleed in every area of your life. It just makes a mess. And it's not your fault. A lot of times when somebody has been abused, we start blaming ourselves for what somebody else did to us. And that's wrong. You should never position yourself to a place where now you as the victim become the one that you make the other person, the abuser, the victim. And that happens a lot. Because when we don't talk about it, guess what? We then make the abuser the victim. When you actually are the one, we got to learn how to deal with it. I know this is going to be pretty difficult for some people because some people are really dealing with some stuff, struggling. But we gotta address it. Building a new relationship from the ashes of past abuse is an opportunity to defy destruction and illuminate hope. That's not on your paper, I'm sorry. Some of my green notes here. So building a new relationship from the ashes of past abuse is an opportunity to defy destruction and illuminate hope in your life. You got to learn how to build from it. It's okay. It's okay to move on. It may take you a little longer than somebody else. That's all right. But learn how to move on. You got to get past it. You can't stay in that slump. Because the longer you stay in that slump, guess what? You've given the abuser the victory. And you got to show the abuser that, listen, I'm better than that. I'm bigger than that. I'm coming out of this thing. However I can, however long it takes, I'm coming out. And this will never happen to me again. And you have to position yourself in a place where this is not going to happen to me again. Or when I see the signs that it's coming, I'm exiting. Mm-hmm. The truth will set you free. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I'm going too fast. I'm getting excited here. Getting excited. Sorry, y'all. You got 2 asterisks here. Let me go back to how we normally do this. This is our key verse or our memory verse. You all remember memory verses from back in the day. Amen. So let's read this one together. This is our key verse for what we're studying today because I think it's very imperative that we look at this verse and we look at it very carefully. Just a few words, but it's very, very powerful. Let's read this one together. John 8:32. The truth will set you free. The truth is, I'm an abuser. The truth is, I've been abused. It will set you free. Acknowledgement is the first step to recovery. So if I'm going to recover from what I've gone through or what I've done, I got to acknowledge that something has happened. And a lot of times we don't want to do that. And even when abuse is taking place in the church, we don't want to acknowledge that I've been abused in church. And it does happen. It doesn't have to be physical. I know we see that with in the Catholic Church. We think, oh, it's just all this physical and sexual abuse. But there's other abuses that go on in churches. And we got to be able to acknowledge those things. There are abuses that occur on the job other than sexual harassment. All of those things happen. There are different abuses that occur in the home other than domestic or physical abuse. Abuse happens, it occurs. But the truth will set you free. John 8:32. Let's look at 4 reasons why nothing is said. 4 reasons why nothing is said. Because there's a lot of people who just won't say anything. For whatever reason, they have the reasons why they have it. It doesn't mean that it's a legitimate reason, but they have a reason why they have not said anything. So there's 4 reasons why nothing is said. Number 1, because they'll think you wanted it to happen or nobody will believe you. They'll think you wanted it to happen, or nobody will believe you. There's 4 reasons why nothing is said. Because they'll think you wanted it to happen, or nobody's going to believe you. You know, people don't say anything in abusive situations because people start to allege that you wanted it to happen. Or you'll start to think within yourself, nobody's going to believe me. Nobody's going to believe that this happened. Well, you know, I think part of that is like, let's take, for instance, like a woman that's in a relationship, abusive, whether it's physical, verbal, emotional, whatever the case may be. And if she stays in that relationship because she doesn't know how to escape, you know, somebody on the outside looking in, every time that person is trying to pour out a crowd, they're really screaming for help, but we don't recognize that they're looking for help. We'll say, well, you must want it to happen because you're still in it. Well, they don't know how to get out. And so some people start, I'm not going to say anything because people are going to think I just wanted it to happen. I didn't want it to happen. I wanted to get out, but I didn't know how to get out. Nobody's ever tried to help me. And every time I screamed, somebody suppressed my voice. And so we start to allege, and that person begins to assume that people are going to think that I wanted it to happen. You're right. Nobody wants to be abused. But people feel that way. They feel like they're stuck because people that should be helping them are now blaming them and saying, you wanted it to happen. Absolutely. And that happens. That's real talk. It happens out there. A lot of times, ladies who's gone through so much, kids who've gone through so much, they don't say anything because they'll say, oh, you wanted that to happen to you. It's like, who wants that to happen? But that's the way they feel. Or nobody else will believe you. Yes, sir.
Well, psychologically, they're brainwashed.
Mm-hmm.
They're in love with that person.
Mm-hmm.
Situation.
They don't. So there's that psychological aspect of the abuse. It causes even more problems because it's psychological. And I don't know how to break out of this. I don't know how to get out of it. So it's psychological. Or nobody will believe you. Because when I tell you, you don't believe me anyway because it sounds far-fetched. You never thought the uncle would do anything like that, or the cousin, or the father, or the mother, or whoever it is would do such a thing. Oh, no, they wouldn't do anything like that. You never thought it would happen in church. You never thought the boss or the neighbor would do anything like that because I've known them my whole life. Oh, they wouldn't do nothing like that. Oh, you tripping. They wouldn't do that. They wouldn't say that to you. They wouldn't touch you like that. Oh, no. Why are you saying that? So why would I come tell you if you're not going to believe me? So what happens, people feel like I have nobody to talk to, so I don't tell anybody because they're not going to believe me anyway. They believe that person is so holy that they can't do anything wrong. But you have no idea that that's a dark person right there, and they're really doing stuff that they have no business doing. They're causing me harm. And here I am trying to tell you, but you don't want to listen to me. So people don't say anything because people don't believe them, or people start thinking that you wanted it to happen. And we know nobody really wants that. But it does occur. Yes, ma'am. No, yes, ma'am. And that's bad within itself because when people find out you have gone through stuff, sometimes people will use that against you. They will start to blame you and put you in positions that you had nothing to do with, but because they know something about you, now I can put you in a situation where I now have an advantage over you. And so that's wrong. Yes, sir. Or did it not happen? And I struggle with those types of, I don't want to say that they're false because the things may really have occurred. But for instance, with Bill Cosby, 35 years ago, you were drugged. You didn't know what was going on. But 35 years later, all of a sudden, you remember what happened when you didn't really know what was going on. It makes no sense to me at all. I mean, that's just me. And I'm not saying that it didn't happen, because he never really denied that he didn't give them the pills or anything. But how do you remember now, but you couldn't remember then? Because they're crying out for help and they don't know which way to go because of fear of retaliation by the abuser. And that's why a lot of people stay in situations because they are scared. They want to get out, but if I get out, they're going to find me and do something worse to me. And because that person, that abuser, has instilled that in their mind that I got power over you. But we're going to try to extract through all of this how to take that power back. Not necessarily for yourself because you may not be that person going through something, but you may know somebody. Or abuse will come your way at some point in time because all of us are going to be abused at some level. And we got to know how to deal with it and take our power back and not try to be hidden by our abusers because they want to stay in power. We have to take that back from them. And so we see number one, where reasons why nothing is said is because they'll think you wanted it to happen or nobody will believe you. Look at something here. Abusers are manipulative. They cleverly identify the vulnerable, abuse them, and then redefine truth for them, as we were talking about. Even when the survivor's heart screams the truth, the abuser's voice is loud in the victim's ears. It convinces them that no one will ever believe they're anything other than an immoral, sinful, willing participant if anyone even believes anything happened at all. And so that causes people to stay quiet. I'm not going to say anything. I know it's wrong. I'm just going to stay in my shell and I'm going to try to front. But the next chance I get, I'm going to try my best to get out. And guess what? When that chance comes, because they're still scared, they're going to get out of it at some point. At some point. Number two, We're talking about 4 reasons why nothing is said. Number 2, it's really my fault. How many times have we seen and heard this? That if you're the one being abused, you eventually start to take ownership for the abuse. Say it's really my fault. Oh, if I wouldn't have said this, I know I shouldn't have. Oh, he didn't mean no harm. They really didn't mean what they was. Oh, they was just playing. I didn't take it like that. They didn't say it. They didn't mean it like that. Yeah, but some people do. A whole lot of people, they turn it around and they start blaming themselves for what has happened to them. And we have to help people like that. And we have to understand it ourselves, because even if it's us, we can't just keep talking about, well, it's my fault, and if I wouldn't have did this, I wouldn't have did that. Abuse, there's no excuse for somebody to abuse you. And it's never your fault that you're abused by somebody. We got to get that out of our minds, that it's my fault that I've been abused. And how many young ladies, how many older ladies, how many people, period, are out there that think it's my fault, especially little kids. They'll really start to blame themselves. Who they going to turn to? What adult's going to listen to a little kid? They start talking about something that's happened to them. The first thing, oh, go on in another room. I was actually on Facebook last week or week before last, saw a lady and her daughter was telling her that the boyfriend was abusing. And the mother got upset with the daughter and all of this kind of stuff, and eventually kicked her out of the house just to save her man. That kind of stuff happens. So now, not only does a scar linger with the mother, and she don't even realize she's been scarred, but that daughter's gone out. She's lost her mother, and she's lost her identity. She's out there, and nobody believes her. So then what happens, people start turning to other things because it's my fault. And so I become the victim of my own demise, of what somebody else did to me. And so I succumb to everything that comes my way, and I start feeling, low self-esteem creeps in, no self-worth. And we see ladies that are doing stuff, and we wonder why they do it, because something has happened in their life. And they believe that it's their fault. And the only way to get out of it is just keep participating in stuff. And so we got to help them. Abusers often make themselves the victim in the aftermath of the abuse. They didn't want to do it, but something in the survivor made them. That's a mentality. They couldn't help it. For the vulnerable, and particularly for those who have experienced any other form of abuse, this is believable to them. This is also extremely confusing when the survivor knows that they said no or demonstrated some other unwillingness to participate, and yet becomes convinced that they actually caused it. The girl that dresses nice, she's a teenager, she looks nice, she looks more grown up, and because she can't help the way her body has developed physically, and she wears clothes, and the guy that abused her says, well, you keep walking in front of me like that, and so I had to just do something. Well, no. And so now what that girl begins to think, because that's all he's telling her, is that it's my fault. It was the clothes I wore. Or it's my body. Well, she can't help her body. She might be able to help the kind of clothes she put on, but that's what she had. And that still doesn't give the guy a pass to do whatever he wants to with her because she looks good to him. And so she starts to take on, it's my fault. No, but it's, it's still, those manly thoughts get to running through your head. That might be the wrong thing. that might be the wrong thing. Definitely don't need no oil. That oil could backfire. Say, as a matter of fact, that's what I need, some oil. It depends on what you're thinking when you see them. That's what the sin is. I mean, just because you look at them and you see, but if you start thinking about what you can get out of them, being lustful, then that's where the problem comes in. Right, well, we think that they're fools. But if you see them streaking and you start saying, well, whoa, wait a minute now. Hey, streak over here, then that's a problem. That's where the problem comes in. Because some people's minds is just not straight enough to say, they are really crazy for doing that, because our minds go in other places. But then also, I do say this about people who dress in a very provocative way, that if you continue to advertise things, you will get some unwanted attention. So you have to be careful not to advertise everything you have, because at some point, somebody is going to say something, because everybody doesn't have that type of control. And when they say something, you can't be upset, because if you're showing everything, at some point, somebody's going to acknowledge your everything. And we can't seem so offended, because generally we do that to draw attention. Whether it's a man or a woman, a man that's got a nice physique and one of those tight compression shirts, he wants you to see all of that. And if the woman starts to look at his arms like, my goodness, he can't be offended by the fact that he's married and he's dressed like that. He's asking for it. He's asking for it. I didn't want to say women, because we keep talking about women, and I don't want to think the preacher was talking about the women dressed, and But it happens. Sometimes we advertise what we have, and we're really wanting attention, but we'll say, I don't want nobody looking at me. He better not look at me like that. Girl, you trying to get him to look at you like that. No, you don't. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It still doesn't give you a pass. I'm just saying it causes some unwanted attention. It doesn't mean that I got to go do something because I saw it, but at some point, the attention is going to be there and something's going to be said, or there's going to be a long look that annoys somebody. Well, that's what you did it for. Yes, sir.
But some of these women do wear these short dresses. They go out at 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the morning.
How you know they out that late? Deacon Cheatham, how you know they out that late? I'm trying to figure out. I always ask you to go straight home. And you talking about they out at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. How you know, Deacon Cheatham? Yes. So we're talking about 4 reasons why nothing is said. So we did number 1. They'll think you wanted it or wanted it to happen, or nobody will believe you. Number 2, it's really my fault. Number 3, but they really ain't that bad. We start talking about they really ain't that bad. The abuser, they really ain't that bad. That's why we don't say anything. It's up to you. I just said ain't. They really ain't that bad. You asking the wrong person. They feel like they can get away with it. And when nothing is done in the system, you just keep doing stuff. Don't ask me that question. He's recording me. It'd be a bad deal. I'm not that holy. That'd be a bad deal. But they really ain't that bad. Somebody's been abused. They get to this place where, I start blaming myself, but then I also start justifying the person and say they really ain't that bad. They ain't as bad. Oh, no, don't do nothing to them. Don't take them to jail. We see this when there's a case where somebody's got to go to jail and the lady can be bleeding from the face, or the person could be bleeding. And they say, oh, no, I don't want to press any charges. Just, it'll be okay. We'll get through it. They're going to go stay over at so-and-so's house tonight, and we'll try to work it out tomorrow. They really ain't that bad. No, it's that bad. And we got to learn how to deal with it. We got to put a stop to the abuse that's happening, because it happens everywhere in different forms and at different stages in people's lives. And some people can't come out of where they are because they have been abused so long. They're so scared. They're so afraid. They feel like they have no voice. They feel like they have no help. And so they stay in obscurity for so long, and we never really get to know that person because they're hiding. But they really ain't that bad. Abusers are sometimes both villain and hero. It's possible for somebody who is sexually abusing somebody else to demonstrate tremendous care for them in other facets of the relationship. Now, this don't discount or minimize the horror, sin, and the legal issues associated with abuse and assault, but it does contribute to why a survivor may not report the abuse. He pays all the bills. He buys me what I want, those kind of things. So I ain't going to say nothing. He ain't that bad. Girl, we just had a little fight. That's all. I was talking stuff to him, and he got mad and slapped me upside my head 5 times. But it ain't that bad. I'm hurting. I'm bruised and abused, but it ain't that bad. Those things happen because they feel like I'm loved because he's paying bills. They feel like they're loved because she's still hanging with him. We start making it seem like it ain't that bad, but it is. We got to deal with it. The abuser's mixed actions lead the survivor to question whether the situation really is as bad as it seems. Because on one hand, you acting like you love me. On the other hand, you acting like you don't want me. So I'm caught somewhere in between love and not being wanted. I figure I'll just stay right here where I am because it's safe in this zone. And how many people are dealing with that where they feel like I'm safe because I do have a place to stay. I got a nice car to drive. It gets my hair done, my nails done. And I'm just saying here, it doesn't always have to be women. It doesn't always have to be physical abuse, whatever it is. Abuse is unacceptable in any form. We have to remember that. Yes. Right. And we can change the narrative starting a little bit at a time. Again, taking that power back. Well, we're not going to let anybody brainwash us because that you're right. It's like, don't say nothing. Just keep that between us. You better not ever mention that again. So now the abused has not only been abused, but they've been threatened by somebody else. Don't you ever bring that up again. So you feel like your voice is silenced. But now we're slowly getting that voice back. But then there's still cases where people don't want to believe you. There's still cases where people want to suppress you. And there's still cases where people feel like it really ain't that bad. So you're absolutely right. It started at some point. And it has to be etched in your brain for you to even begin to think that way. Because what happens is people have wanted us to think less of ourselves. And when you think less of yourself, you'll deal and accept anything that comes your way and start thinking that it's okay. Yes, sir.
Trump paid out some women over there. You know, he paid his attorney and everything. They gave him money to hush up, keep them out.
To silence their voice for so long. But then these women somehow, some way, they found their voice, even behind the dollars. And that's why they start to come out like, wait a minute now, this did occur. Because you can't let money silence you. Can't pay me off for what you did to me because money can't buy all that back. Whatever it was, whatever type of abuse it was, you can't buy your way out of it. I've been abused. I've been violated. That's what has happened. Violated. And that has to be addressed and it has to be dealt with. However, whatever consequences comes with it, it has to be dealt with. But we can't be silenced. Number 4. We're talking about 4 reasons why nothing is said. Number 4, I don't want to hurt the family. I don't want to hurt the family.
It's affecting everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So not only are they hurt, the family unit is lost at that point. It's lost. It's fractured because, again, one's going one way, one's going the other. That's fractured. And if we really care about the family, we have to try to figure out how do we keep this together. So when you see something, say something. I know that almost sounds cliche, but it's the truth. It has to be said not only by the victim, but those who are witnesses to what goes on. Something has to be said. If we're going to save the family, if we're going to save the woman, if we're going to save the man, we got to be willing to say something about it, address the issue when we see it. Not later on down the road, but we got to try to find our voice immediately and deal with it. We really do. That affects him and his future, but and the relationship he has with his mom, because after he starts to smell himself, he starts to treat her like what he has witnessed. And so it just perpetuates the problem ongoing until something is done to break that curse, that cycle of abuse that's going on. And we've all seen it. It's unfortunate. It's out there. But how do we deal with it? We can't just continue to be silent about it. We have to address it. And the church has to be willing to talk about and address these kinds of issues instead of trying to be so politically correct where we don't talk about it. These are the real things that we have to deal with. And we'll get into the biblical aspect of it, of how we address these things. But we have to make sure that our voice is not silenced. and we use the things that we have at our disposal. Abusers aren't generally living in isolation. They have a family, often a spouse and or children, perhaps grandchildren. Since abuse most often occurs in the context of relationship, it's not uncommon for the survivor to know and even care about the family of the abuser. And there's no possible way to report sexual abuse or assault without devastating the family of the abuser. This is what most strongly stopped this person in this story for so long. And it's also why this article in this paper is being written anonymously. It says, I don't want to bring any additional pain to those who were also victims in this situation. Victims whose worlds have also been turned upside down. They deserve compassion, space, and grace.
I don't know how this guy got away with it so long in that gymnastics deal.
Because again, those girls were scared to say something. They got scholarships. They got to go on trips. They were winning championships and things like that. And so, the abuser made it seem like it was glamorous. That, hey, I'm your trainer, I'm your friend, this is supposed to happen. That's what he started to convince those girls this is what's supposed to happen. And they started to buy into it. And the more girls he abused, the more it looked like it was okay. Until finally one of them broke and said, wait a minute, I done had enough of this. And they started coming out one by one. And before you know it, was a whole bunch of them that came out. This has been going on for a long time. But as long as people are silent, we'll never get to the root of the problem. And so sometimes we have to give voice to those who appear to be voiceless by listening to them and encouraging them to speak out against those kind of things. And so that's why stuff goes on so long. Those little boys that in the Catholic Church, if the ones who previously came out never would have came out, it would still continue to go. I mean, it still goes on to this day because nothing gets done to those bishops that do these things. You start dealing with them and addressing it and putting down some real consequences other than paying out fines and things like that. You put some real consequences to it, it'll start to change the way these guys think when they do stuff. It'll make them think again. Maybe. We don't. I know, but that's their mentality. Yeah. We know God doesn't, but they have this idea that we are right there. And we can do whatever we want, and we can Hail Mary, and it's good, and, I'm good. I can continue to do what I'm doing, and nothing can be said or done to me. I'm bigger and better than you, and so now I can suppress everybody around me. Who's going to say something to me? And that's the mentality that some people have. So what I hear you all saying is that also we don't say anything, so we can add a number 5, based on the roles and positions of people. Nothing is said based on the roles and the positions of people in our lives. Depending on who they are, whatever position or role they play in our lives, that determines if I'm going to say something. If they appear to be somebody of high stature in my life, I probably won't say anything. If they're low stature, I might come out and say something. If they seem stronger than I'm probably not going to say anything. So the roles we play, on jobs, that's my boss or my boss's boss, the CEO. At the church, it's the pastor, the bishop, the pope, or whoever it is. Wherever in the family, it's the father or the mother, whoever's the dominant figure in the house. The roles we play could also cause people to be silent. And we have to be careful, even in our roles, that we don't use our roles to take advantage of people and abuse people, misuse people, because it does happen. And it's easy to get so caught up in your position that you forget you still have a responsibility to treat people with dignity and have some type of morals about yourself. Because I think that I'm better than everybody else. You have the Donald Trump syndrome. That's what you're saying. You think I can do whatever I want to do and can't nobody say nothing. It's executive privilege. Probably so. They wouldn't be lusting after so much if they had a mate. Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. We don't know. And it's not all of them. It's just some of them out there, that do that kind of stuff. All right, so this is quite exhaustive afterwards. Where we talk about 7 steps to freedom. Let's stop right there because if we get into it, we'll start and then I hate to start it and really not really be able to dig into it because there's quite a bit here. Because we start dealing with the 8 kinds of emotional abuse. And I know there's more than that, but there's 8 that's listed here. Some of our counseling students will be able to help us with some of these things as well. But when you go home, we never have homework or anything. When you go home, I want you to think about types of abuse, not maybe that you've experienced, but different types of abuse that occur, that occurs. Again, you may not know about a specific situation, but you know that occurs. And then other reasons why we keep silent. Other reasons why we keep silent. You should be thinking about that just so we can continue to talk about this, because we want to exhaust this subject as well. Because if we're talking about relationships, we've got to deal with all aspects. And we know that there's abuse that occurs in relationships. And people are tired of it. They're tired of abuse, but we got to help them find their voice. That's the church's job, to help people find their voice. There's some things that have occurred in people's lives and the psychological aspect, and then there's oppression that goes on that causes people to lash out. And when you think about our community specifically, that angle of oppression is still there. And if I can oppress you all so much, you'll start fighting against one another and doing different things. And that's why we do so much to each other, and we act like it doesn't bother us, because the world says that it's okay, and we've been positioned in such a way we feel like we got to fight each other for what little bit each other has. And if I take your life, then I'm okay. I become something, because we've made that seem like it's glamorous, that if I take your life, I take something from you, that now I then become. And so when I feel like I've become, guess what? I keep on doing. And now that causes fear in everybody else, a form of abuse. I start abusing everything around me because I think I'm the man. Because when you're abused, it starts to cause other things to trigger in your life that you never expected. I mean, that man went through a down time in his life. But again, when you find your voice and you start to deal with the things that has happened in your life, you look at all the stuff that you can do and become. Because it was always there, it's just somebody tried to suppress it. But at any rate, it's good to see you all. Thank you so much. Continue to be in prayer for each other, our church.